Hey, I'm Lexi, and this is what you should know. I would like to start this episode by giving a massive trigger warning. This episode discusses the brutal rape and murder of Eurydice Dixon. If this episode is going to be too hard to listen to, by all means, please click off. There will always be another episode, and I do give the heads up in saying that this is going to be a very difficult episode. It took me a while to research because I needed to take a few breaks while doing so. Otherwise, if you do want to stay, this is what you should know about the murder of Eurydice Dixon. Eurydice Jane Dixon was born to Jeremy Dixon and Karen Walters on the 10th of November, 1995. She was described as a bright and remarkable woman. Her sister Polly said that she was gutsy, determined, and clever. This would be obvious to everyone who was ever blessed enough to get to know her. Eurydice was a creative soul and studied drama at the Deakin University. And while studying, she appeared in the role of Justine in Burwood Student Theatre Company's production of Cossie in 2014. She also performed with the Moorland Theatre Company, an amateur theatre company in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, and performed in the Armit's Yearly Snatches, which is a run of short plays. It was 2018 when she made her Melbourne International Comedy Festival debut with a solo stand-up comedy show called At Home, I Feel Like a Tourist at Melbourne's Highlander Bar. And that's all she got to have, was one final show at the Highlander Bar. This performance can be seen online as she jokes about equality, feminism, and robot uprisings. You can really see how promising and bright her future looks in this short, less than 2-minute video. But on the 12th of June 2018, after her set, Eurydice Dixon decided to walk home. She said goodbye to her boyfriend Tony, gave him a hug, and purchased a paleo bar for the walk home. She did everything right, the ways we had all been taught to. She took the well-lit, densely populated paths, and she sent a text message to Tony at 12 a.m. saying that she was almost home, but that still wasn't enough. On the morning of the 13th of June 2018, Eurydice was found dead at Melbourne's Princes Park. The brief window between sending that message and her body being found at 2:50 a.m., she was violently raped and murdered. Images were released that day of a man that was seen in CCTV footage in the general areas that she had been seen. By that night, news of Eurydice's death had spread across the nation, along with the picture of a man wanted for questioning. And with that, 19-year-old James Todd was arrested after he presented himself at the police station in Broadmeadows. While in custody, James told his father over a prison telephone that he was very disappointed at the way the crime took place, that immediately after he felt like shit, that he hoped it would be better next time. Next time. Take that sentence and mull it over for a second. He hoped it would be better next time. Meaning at that time he was fully planning on going out and doing it again. The short of this is that he would be sentenced to life in prison and won't be seeing freedom until he is at least 54 years old. But it is from here that I will be getting into the disturbing details and the real feeling of anger and fear that has constantly been flaring for years since. And honestly, for so many years before Eurydice was even thought of. So at this point, the earlier trigger warning is in full effect, and I will not be providing any further. Otherwise, I will be breaking this episode up every 3 minutes to let you know that there is a trigger warning incoming. It was just after midnight on that Wednesday when James Todd was stalking Eurydice as she crossed over the grass of Princes Park, hunting her. He had followed her for roughly 5 kilometers through the city, determined to act on a depraved fantasy. One where he was in control, and in which the female of it is raped and then killed. And this is exactly what he did to her. Leaving her body in the park, James scrolled through a mobile phone for about 10 minutes, using the camera to examine the scratches on his face, before falling asleep on a bench at Royal Park Station. He also claimed that after the attack, he defecated on a track before walking again through Prince's Park, returning to the scene of the crime, where he was directed away by police who had already established the crime scene. And the only reason he handed himself on later that day was because friends told him that his face was all over the news. At the beginning, he denied being Eurydice's killer, but later admitted to it after hearing that DNA testing was underway. The immediate outpouring of sorrow and anger was large and loud. Many comedians, as well as Melbourne International Comedy Festival director Susan Provan, were amongst those who donated via a fundraising page to set up to raise money for Eurydice Dixon's family. The Highlander Bar publicly posted the following: "We are deeply shocked and saddened by the tragic news of the death of Eurydice Dixon. She was a remarkable, talented, kind, unique, and universally loved person, and the entire staff are shattered and heartbroken. Our heart goes out to her family, the comedy community, and everyone else who knew and loved her. She will be remembered fondly and sadly missed. Rest in peace, Eurydice." We have no further comments at this devastating time. The loudest reaction to the news was that of scores of angry and terrified women. In response to the police advice to take responsibility for your own safety by making sure that people know where you are and keep your phone in hand if you are walking alone. A tweet from Lindsay Green echoed years of anger that many women have felt, saying, "What does it mean to take responsibility for our safety? Dress differently? Walk differently? Look at or talk to men in a certain way? Message our friends when we get home? Walk with keys in our hands? Because we already do these things, and men continue to assault and murder us." Freya Logan, a Melbourne local and co-host of Follow Sports Like a Girl podcast, released her own thoughts on the matter, which again echoes the thoughts and fears of women. "I did not know Eurydice Dixon, but I felt her death personally. Not only myself, but a lot of women will feel the death of Eurydice Dixon personally. Not because we know her, but because her murder is a summation of fears we govern our own lives by every single day. It's winter, and it's dark by 5:30 p.m., which means my normal commute home is a range of thousands of thoughts about what I could do just in case. Is my phone charged? Does someone at the bus stop or on the bus have a weird vibe? I'll take my headphones off just in case. I'll hold my keys in my hands as maybe a weapon, and so I can get into my house quickly just in case. I've made a note of friendly-looking houses in the day, just in case something happens in the dark. I text my friends my location just as Eurydice did. I don't know women who don't do this because there are demons in the dark. I wish I didn't have to, and I wish this incident didn't reiterate my fear of the dark, just as Jill Meagher's murder did. I wish we taught men to be kind and compassionate, empathetic to those outside their families. Teach them this is not a weakness. Teach them not to murder women. I could reiterate with you the thousands of posts and echo the words, but by the end of it, if you do not already understand it, is just the same fear being echoed again and again. The horrifying reality is there is a severe lack of women out there who have not been assaulted, whether that is verbally or physically. It is the same because we don't know if the dude who's just catcalling us in a way that would shame their mother is just being a dickhead, or if they will then take any response as an invitation to take what they want from us, regardless of if we plead with them to stop. James Todd is the quote-unquote man we talk about when we air our fears. I am aware it's not all men, but it is those like him who scare us. And without context, we can't pick the dangerous ones out of a lineup at random. They look exactly the same as any other unsuspecting man walking down the street. But it isn't just the aggressors that scare us, but also the poor taste clowns. As Andrew Nolch, shortly after Eurydice's murder, vandalized the memorial that locals had set up. Andrew had told the police when interviewed, "I wanted to see if it could make the news. I wanted just to see the spray-painted dick on the screen. I just thought that would be funny." He also told the police that he just wanted to annoy the feminists. because antagonizing the scared and angry by defacing and disrespecting a memorial is a grand idea. Andrew received a 5-month jail sentence for his idiocy and was told to be grateful for the leniency, which he should have been. Andrew, however, did something even more stupid by then traveling overseas when it was strictly prohibited. He was then jailed for those breaches by Judge Pullen. Jeremy Dixon, Eurydice's father, wrote an affidavit saying that Andrew's prison term caused more distress as he didn't want his daughter's legacy to involve unnecessary imprisonment. I don't want the applicant's imprisonment to be part of my daughter's story and legacy. I want good things to stem from her life. That's what Mr. Dixon wrote. But as anger-inducing as it is for that grown-ass man to act like an entitled child, it was just that. An entitled man-child acting out. He went for parole in 2020 and was denied. But beyond the outcry of rage that was felt between Eurydice's death and the vandalism of her memorial, the court case against James Todd had started. The court was told that the year before the murder, James was obsessed and addicted with the fantasy of coercive rape, which quickly escalated to include fantasies of death. He had searched the internet for snuff films, which, if you are unaware, tends to include violent sexual encounters ending in the murder of the victim. These can start out as coercive rape, which the honest thought on that is it is just rape, where the victim is compliant to prevent further damage or just outright horrific violent rape. I don't like the term coercive rape because it is bullshit. The end of the day, people need to learn. Yes means yes, because there's 1,000 ways to say no. Justice Kay brought up that there were poor prospects of addressing his sexual sadism disorder, and therefore he had extremely limited opportunities of rehabilitation, and therefore was satisfied that James had fully intended to kill Eurydice. This was only highlighted as the 24-hour period surrounding his vicious attack was explored and exposed. That day, James had finished his hospitality class around 3 p.m. and caught a train into the city with 3 of his friends from college. He tried to buy alcohol at the liquor land. However, he did not have his proof of age card with him and was declined. But he found that he was luckier at a celebrations, purchasing vodka and rolling papers. They hung out in Batman Park, sharing his vodka around. After a time of this, one of his friends left to go home. When the vodka was finished, James bought cider. His 2 remaining friends grabbed cups from 7-Eleven. And back at the park, James bought weed from some random men sitting nearby. He smoked 2 joints. At 8:30 p.m., the 3 men walked to the Southern Cross station, where they bought Jim Beam and cola before catching a Broadmeadows-bound train. One of his friends got off at the Flinders Street station. The remaining 2 kept heading towards Broadmeadows, where James lives with his parents in a housing commission. But he instead got off at Newmarket, leaving his remaining friend on the train. It isn't very clear as to why he decided to stay in town. Maybe he was having fun, and the mix of drugs and alcohol had made it easier for him to go with the internal flow of looking for more fun. He purchased tobacco, returned to the city, arriving back at Flinders Street by 10:25 p.m. At 10:43, James walked past the Woolworths, where Eurydice was standing with her boyfriend Tony. James continued to the McDonald's. After eating, he returned to the intersection of Flinders and Swanson, where Eurydice was saying her goodbyes to her boyfriend as Tony's tram arrived. Standing outside Young and Jackson Hotel, James crossed towards the station where he saw Eurydice walking in the opposite direction. He loitered, allowing her to pass. When she was halfway across Flinders Street, that is when he started to follow her. He kept a constant distance of roughly 15 to 20 seconds behind her. When she would stop, he would stop and roll a cigarette, or play on his phone, simulating legitimacy. They crossed the street and walked past Melbourne University, where the last CCTV footage of her is recorded. Arriving at Prince's Park, Eurydice removes her shoes and walks into what should have been a beautiful new day at 12:02 a.m. She sent a message to Tony saying, "I'm nearly home. How about you?" She crosses 2 soccer pitches, steps onto the 3rd, and that is when James grabs her by the hair and the back of her dress. He throws her to the ground and sits on her chest, choking her. Keeping one hand around her throat, he used the other to rip open her clothes, and then digitally raped her. After that, he then attempted to rape her again, but could not get an erection. He then crushed her windpipe, took her phone, and left the park. Instead of finding a way home, James slept at the train station. At 5:50 a.m., James took the train home. Once back in his room, he searches for Prince's Park and reads about the discovery of a woman's body. Becoming bored with the little information available and excitement, he Googles strangulation and rape porn, selects the first website, clicking on the category strangled and brutally raped, navigates to a subcategory entitled brutal rape, choking till death, strangled forced videos, and views 2 pages of results. At 7 a.m. on a different porn site, he searches for brunette videos and then searches for curvy emo girl, browsing 4 pages of results. Obviously, nothing was going to excite him as the real thing. Even with all of this being revealed, James stood silently with his eyes closed, seeming completely cold and emotionless. You waited until Eurydice was well into the dark reaches of Prince's Park before attacking her. There was no evidence that your vicious act has troubled your conscience. Justice K had said this as he handed down a sentence of 11 years jail for rape, 7 years for attempted rape, 2 years for sexual assault. These sentences are to be served consecutively with a further life sentence, which means he will serve no less than 35 years. In 2020, James Todd appealed his sentence because, according to him, what he did shouldn't have had such a harsh sentence. But Justice K was not incorrect when he described him as pure and unmitigated evil. The lawyers James had hired argued that his young age, guilty plea, and quote-unquote good character, dysfunctional upbringing, remorse, and being on the autism spectrum meant his sentence was manifestly excessive. They also had the audacity to argue at his appeal that his sentence was disproportionate to the severity of his crimes. How can anyone remotely sane believe that such a violent act should be given any clemency? And the worst thing is, legitimately, that this is one of the many fears for victims of assault coming forward. Because after having someone strip you of your power like that, facing your trauma and being strong enough to take it to court is harder than I could ever put into words. And I say that from experience. But then you have the defense team demanding clemency, pointing their talons at the victim, saying they provoked them. The offender is innocent because how could they control themselves around the victim? And it comes again and again with questions like, what were you wearing? What had you been drinking? Did you lead them on? What did you say to make them think you wanted it? And if you are lucky enough to survive that kind of physical attack, you then have the collection of proof with medical poking and prodding while being asked those questions by the police. So the fact that James and his horde of leeches came forward to say that it is unfair honestly pisses me off if you couldn't tell. Eurydice Dixon was a wonderful and funny woman. Her father and her sister said she lived an honorable life. She deserves so much better than this. And I am happy to say that Chief Justice Ferguson felt the same, saying that given James's limited prospects for rehabilitation and the seriousness of his offense, a life sentence with 35 years minimum was appropriate and still is, continuing to describe what he did as loathsome and cruel. Chief Justice Ferguson then said, "A young woman should be able to walk home alone after a night out without any fear of being harmed, let alone subjected to a vile sexual attack and killed." And she is right, it shouldn't happen, but it continues to happen. After Eurydice's murder, more continued to happen in quick succession in the same state of Victoria. January 16, 2019, the body of A.L. Mazoe, 21 years old, is found behind a hedge near La Trobe University. She had been attacked while walking home on FaceTime with her sister. On FaceTime. They said, have our phone in our hand. She was on FaceTime and it still happened. April 24, 2019, the body of Natalina Angok, 32, is found against a wall in Chinatown. May 26, 2019, the body of Courtney Heron, 25, is found behind logs in Royal Park, near where Eurydice Dixon's body was found. I will be listing helpline numbers that you can reach out to if you need assistance. Please reach out if you need help. I promise you deserve the support, even if there is someone out there telling you that you don't. But to end things on a more bittersweet note, Friends of Eurydice Dixon started a new, not-for-profit organization that will help others continue her legacy of delivering challenging social commentary. In October of 2019, they launched the organization Awkward Giraffe. The organization's stated goal is to support emerging comedians whose work is in the spirit and legacy of Eurydice's work. The name came from a habit she had of making an awkward giraffe sign with her hands during uncomfortable situations. Kieran Butler said in a 2019 interview, she is more than the way she died, and continued on to say that the not-for-profit was about moving forward and celebrating Eurydice's bravery. Also saying, we all genuinely feel we were in the presence of somebody who was doing something quite special comedically, and we probably feel an obligation to try to continue her work. Lucy Best, one of Eurydice's best friends. Lucy Best, one of Eurydice's friends, and fellow comedians said, she drew the problems out into view and made serious issues look ridiculous, and that the not-for-profit was definitely very fitting and lined up with how she would push the envelope. Lucy continued on by saying, she drew attention to gender equality, suicide, and ageism through comedy. Eurydice always had a unique and very intelligent angle on things that most people, comics or not, prefer not to talk about. And on such kind words for Eurydice Dixon, that is all I have for you this week. This has been a very heavy case. I know I am feeling a little rough around the edges, and will post some absolutely lovely pictures of Miss Dixon. You'll be able to see these on my Instagram and Facebook under What You Should Know Australia. If you want to send an email, you can at whatyoushouldknowaustralia@gmail.com. As I said, I will be posting helplines. I'll also be posting the link to the Beyond Blue chat room, just in case you need to talk to someone and you don't feel like you have the capacity to actually talk. But until next week, stay safe and stay hydrated. Bye.